The beautiful part about being a podcaster is when you are listening to another podcast and you get inspired by what they say, all you have to do is just come home and press record. So today I got inspired by a podcast where this celebrity of sorts, a radio personality, podcast personality, was talking about his career. And he wasn't talking about how he was getting massive deals or massive numbers, but he was talking about how he built his career to have a diversified portfolio of businesses that he owned, podcast networks that he owned, deals that he was a part of, and he didn't have ownership in all of it, but he's really happy with the way he's built his career, even though he's gotten a lot of sort of criticism of how he doesn't own everything. And it really got me thinking about how we as science communicators in the marine science and conservation field, sometimes we expect to hit the big time. You know, when we first launch a podcast, I certainly did. And I quickly realized over time that this is a slow process and it's time to build something and it takes time. And if you put the work in, you put the effort in, you'll see those gains slowly come. And every once in a while, you'll get a little blip and you'll go up. Sometimes you'll go down, but it doesn't matter. You're still affecting people and you're still able to get your message across as long as you keep publishing. So we're going to talk about that and my thoughts on that podcast. I'll go into a little bit more detail on this podcast, on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. So let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening in the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the speaking up for the ocean part and science communication in general. I've had the opportunity to teach science communication at Duke University in their online program. I've had the opportunity to sort of mentor people who want to start, doing science communication, especially through podcasting. I've taught podcasting courses and I've been contracted to do like online podcasting courses as a module for, business owners and gym owners and so forth. And it's always a pleasure. I always love talking about communications, messaging, storytelling, just the whole process of podcasting in general, or even just digital platforms, the art of storytelling on digital platforms. It's something that always makes me excited. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, not necessarily in the marine space all the time. Every once in a while I will listen to it, but a lot of times I will listen to people who interest me. If I had the opportunity and the time, I would be one of those people who interview interesting people. There's actually a really cool podcast by Guy Kawasaki, who used to work for Apple and then kind of went on his own sort of branding journey. And he's more of a business personality and a marketing personality. And he has a podcast called Remarkable People. And my co-host from the Beyond Jaws podcast, Dr. David Ebert, was on his podcast recently. And he talks about how he likes to talk about remarkable people. He talks to David Suzuki. He talks to Jane Goodall. He talks to David Ebert. He talks to all these different people within a variety of spaces because he finds them remarkable. And for me, I listen to a lot of people on podcasts because I find them remarkable. I find them interesting in some sort of way. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't listen to every podcast they're on. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, because, if you notice that people who are on different platforms, different radio shows or TV shows or podcasts, you hear them say the same story over and over again because they're in front of different audiences. So it makes sense when that happens. So a lot of the times I won't listen or watch those podcasts. Or those shows. However, I will listen to and watch a podcast that I watched recently. It was a podcast that I've never really seen before. I didn't know the person who was doing the interview, but the person who was being interviewed, the guest, was very interesting to me, especially with his topic of talking about how he built, I wouldn't say it's an empire, I guess it is an empire, but how he built his career. I thought it was really interesting, a really interesting perspective. Now, the person I'm talking about is Charlemagne the God. He is a radio personality for the breakfast television show, and it's a morning television show on a New York radio station, but it's syndicated in like 34 or 35 different I guess markets is what they call them. And so it's a radio show, but it's also a podcast. And he also has a podcast network. He's written books. He's produced and executive produced on different shows. He's been on MTV too as a talent, as a personality. He's, I said he works with iHeart for his podcast network. He's helped provide a platform for other people who have become huge sensations in the internet world, the digital world, the comedy world. He's worked with a lot of celebrities. He's interviewed a lot of celebrities. He's had a very interesting career. And he's, humble beginnings from a small town in North Carolina. And, he talked about, in the interview, he talked about how he slowly worked his way up. People gave him chances, and he worked his butt off to sort of, I guess, prove them right. Prove them that they deserve to take a chance on him, and work for them as much as possible and be able to build his profile within that market, like it was a radio market. And then he went to a different TV station or a radio station. Then sometimes he wouldn't have made it through, and then he went to a different TV station or radio station. Then he went to another radio station. Then he signed on as a talent for MTV2, and then it just kind of grew from there. And he's had a lot of criticism against him for a number of different reasons. When he first started out, I remember there's a lot of clips of him saying some pretty immature things, but he's grown over that time. And he's been very transparent about therapy and this and that. He's a guy that, he's sort of like a man's man type of guy, but he's also very big in self-awareness, growth from a personal standpoint, a mental standpoint, very big on therapy for himself and how he's grown, how he's got daughters and a wife. And he's had criticism for the career that he's had. And somebody came out and said they criticized him for not having ownership in the breakfast television show that he's on. And so, or the podcast or the radio station that he's on. And, and he kind of laughed at it. He's like, who cares? I don't have to own everything I'm on. He goes, I signed on a contract as a talent to build that show. And I've been in that show for 13 years. And he's signed 4 different contracts, meaning they've wanted him back again and again and again and again, 4 different times over a span of 13 years. And the show keeps getting better and better, or bigger and bigger, right? And there have been other talent that's been on that show that's come and gone. But he and this other guy, DJ Envy, have stayed on, and they talk about hip-hop. They talk about a lot of black culture, which is interesting to me. They talk a lot about sort of just the news that goes on, politics and everything, and they have really interesting interviews. And it goes deep sometimes, and sometimes it's just for fun, and they have a lot of fun on the show. But his career, the criticism that he has, he goes, I don't understand the criticism that I get. He's like, I have a huge diversified portfolio of things that are going on. Yes, I'm busy, he says, but it's a matter of that he has things going on that are beneficial to him. And he says there are some times where he's gone and he hasn't made a lot of money on certain aspects, but it's built the opportunity to do something next. And that is where the key hit me. That's where the inspiration hit me. I was driving my car listening to this episode. It's a YouTube episode. By the way, if you ever join YouTube Premium, you can actually listen to videos with your phone locked. So I can listen to like these podcast type episodes without having to watch the video. Super, super impressed by that. But I digress. That part of the show where he was like, there's certain things I did just to build my profile, to build the skill set so that when I went on to something else, I was able to do something. Or he was able to build a platform. He was able to build something where he made friends with somebody else in maybe a lesser role, quote unquote, lesser role in terms of payment. But then he says he was able to bring those people, the friendships he made. Now those all pay off, because if one of his friends is in a movie or something like that, he gets a part in it, or a TV show, and vice versa. They help each other out by having them on their shows and providing up their platform and giving their platform to their friends that they grew up in the same business, right? Even if they're a little bit diversified in terms of what they do and the talent that they have, they still do the same business. And those two aspects hit me big time, because those two aspects are things that I like to do, right? I rarely say no to things. Sometimes to my detriment in terms of time, but I rarely say no to things. I have this podcast, which is not something huge. I'm not going to get $20 million from Spotify or $60 million from Spotify to be exclusive on their show. I don't get millions of downloads per episode. I have 2.5 million downloads. I can say that now. I have 2.5 million downloads, which is a huge feat for me. It's a huge step in the growth of the podcast over these last 9 years. But I built it slowly, and I built it almost one fan at a time, to be able to have an audience that's listening to this podcast that says, hey, Andrew's got something here that I really like. I'm going to come back and I'm going to listen to this guy because I really enjoy his content. By the way, thank you for doing that. I never in a million years thought that I would have a podcast that would have millions of downloads. And that is something to be proud of for me, but it's not something that I'm making millions of dollars off of. I am doing this a lot of times as a hobby, which recently turned into more of a business venture because I realized that I want to do this more full-time than anything else. I would rather be able to create content, to tell stories of various people within the marine science, to provide that platform to tell those stories and put those stories together, so that other people can hear about these wonderful stories. That gets me excited, right? Each of those stories, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. People need to know about this. And so that's what I want to do. But I can't necessarily just be, hey, I've got this great podcast. If somebody offers me a spot on TV, I'm like, I'm not going to do it unless I get paid, tens of thousands of dollars to do it. I just can't do that. If somebody offers me like a spot on a TV show or an internet show or something like that, or a guest spot on a podcast, I'm saying yes. I'm saying yes to everything I can to build, because you never know what that will build to and what opportunity that will either provide me or one of the people that I grew up in this business over the last 9 years, even more than that, over the last 10 or 13 years of me being in science communication and meeting the people that I have met and collaborating with those people, working together to put that message forward, to say, these are the people that I like to associate myself in terms of the work that we do, right? All the guests that I've had on, everything, if there's an opportunity to bring them on a platform or to put them on something else, I'm all for it. That is something that I think that they can contribute, that would be a star. And sometimes, and a lot of times, they're going to outshine me. And I'm cool with that. I can't wait. I love that when that happens, right? Because that's why I bring them on, because they're a lot of times smarter than me, more knowledgeable in the projects that they do and the culture that they have and the experience that they have that I don't have. A lot of the times, that's why I bring them on to the show. That's why I have them on as interviews. And it's a pleasure for me to have that. So to be in a position where I'm at, where I've been doing this for 9 years, almost 10 years, and saying I'm going to be snooty to the next opportunity that comes to me is not going to happen, right? I am going to take that opportunity as long as it fits within a time frame that I can produce and put in a good product. That's what I want to do, right? And to be able to build new skill sets, build experience, build contacts, right? And build these professional relationships with producers and other podcasters in the business, and be able to collaborate and be able to help each other out. That is how you do science communication. In a digital world where you never know what's going to happen, by putting these little building blocks together and stacking them on top of each other. Sometimes they may not stack right on top of each other, and they may divert out to the right or to the left. And you might have to level off a little bit before you can grow. That's okay. Because as you build more and more building blocks and make more and more connections, you'll get higher and higher, and that building will grow. and grow and grow. And sometimes it takes tangents and goes off into different directions, but sometimes it'll just go vertical. And you might get steps up where it's a big step. You might get a step down depending on what you're looking for and what risks you're taking. But the whole idea is to continue to build. So for example, when I look at my downloads per month, okay, this is something that I look at. I'm a data geek, so I have to look at it. When somebody starts a podcast and they say, hey, how many downloads should I expect within the first year? I tell people, don't even look at your downloads, knowing full well that every day I look at my downloads because I'm addicted to data and I want to see what's up and down and what's happening. And if I just go based off of a couple of days, especially by launching a new podcast, or even just now, even just going by month, if I look at how I do the variability within the month, over a year, within a year, I might get discouraged. Because I'll tell you, like January is usually my highest month of downloads. And June, July is usually my lowest month of downloads. And it has nothing to do with the content. It has everything to do with the behavior of my audience. A lot of the audience members are January. It's after the holidays. You're going out less. A lot of times it's winter for people, so they're not going out as much. And they're staying at home, or they're going in the car more, they're commuting more, and they're listening to podcasts. In June, July, a lot of the times it's summer. They have breaks, they have holidays. And so the downloads go down quite significantly, sometimes by half. But if I looked at just June and July and ignored January, I'd be like, wow, these are really low compared to what my normal ones are. And so that variability, if I had given up after that, or if I look at the overall numbers of downloads year by year, or month by month, I'm like, well, hold on a second, like that doesn't track. So luckily I have 9 years of data. So I can go back every June, July and say, how did I do this time last year? And what were the changes in that time? Also the pandemic made podcast downloads go skyrocket. So like even looking at the last 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022, podcasts were up. We were doing pretty well in downloads. Then it slowly went down as people started to get out and do more things. Right? They're not listening to podcasts all the time. They're busy with other things, being outside, playing with their kids, being in the water, in the ocean. It's hard to listen to a podcast when you're doing that. But if I looked at that overall, I would just be like, oh, hold on a second here. Like maybe I shouldn't even continue. But then I know year over year, I keep getting more and more downloads. I beat last year, in certain months. But overall, will I beat the next year? Even if I don't, I'm still connecting with a lot of people. I'm still engaging with a lot of people. And it's not about the downloads. It really isn't. The downloads just kind of give you what the trends are, right? It gives you a little bit of pattern, tells you if you're growing a little bit, maybe you're decreasing a little bit. Sometimes you can look at sort of the retention on the show and see how long people are listening, and that's okay, right? You want to make sure that people are listening all the way through. But overall, if people, if people are talking to you about your podcast, if they're connecting with you about your podcast, it's just a matter of just continuing to publish, because you never know when you get that new audience member that resonates with that one podcast. I'm going to tell you, this is episode 1478. I'm almost at 1,500 episodes. There is a whole catalog of episodes that people can listen to. Some may or may not be out of date. I don't know. Because it's a lot of it's news, but it's still interesting information for a lot of you people who are listening to this. This audience likes ocean conservation. And although there's been an evolution of sort of the way I speak and the way I structure my shows and the frequency at which I publish, there's still, episodes that will entertain people and inform people. And it's building blocks, and it slowly grows. Those downloads, total downloads, slowly grow every month, every day, every month, every year, every decade almost. And so the whole point of this episode is to say, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, it's not going to get to a lot of people within the first year. If you're thinking of starting a YouTube video, it's not going to get to a lot of people within the first year. If it does, fantastic. But if it doesn't, it's okay, because you're putting the building blocks together. You're laying down the foundation to build that building that may go up slowly And you might get some weird looking shapes in your building as it kind of goes to the right or to the left or up and down, but it's still overall going to go up. And that means you're reaching more and more people as the years go on. And that's important to remember when you're starting your science communication sort of journey. If you're looking at Instagram and you start posting on Instagram and all of a sudden your followers go down, don't stop posting. Continue to post, because you'll attract more people who want that content. Same thing with any other platform. The more you publish, the more people are going to come to you and be able to say, hey, I resonate with that. That's pretty cool. Like, let's continue with that. Like, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to follow. I'm going to subscribe. I'm going to do whatever. I might even support them. So it's important that science communication, if it's on top of your mind and you want to go through with it, you go through the hard times no matter what. You have to start pushing through those hard times. Those times where you're getting 1 listener, 5 listeners, 2 listeners, under 10 listeners. Then it grows to 30, to 40, to 100, to 150, to 1,000. Right? Sometimes you never know when you get that. You never know what's going to happen with your show. You just never know. Joe Rogan, whether you love him or hate him, started off doing a podcast in front of a live audience at a gymnasium where the sound was echoey, and it really, if you listen to it now, you're like, man, that sucked. Made $100 million over the last 3 years. Right? But that was like almost 2 decades ago. Right? He started almost 2 decades ago. He put in his time. You may not agree with everything he puts out, including myself. I may not agree with everything he puts out, but he put in his time, and he's now he's reaping the rewards. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, if you're thinking about doing some sort of digital storytelling, 1, I think you should do it. And 2, hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. I'd love to talk about helping you out. I'm putting up a group program together. And if I have about 5 or 6 people interested, I'm going to start this program. And it's a program where we're going to meet. It's going to just be like a coaching program. We're going to meet twice a month, and we're going to talk about your podcast and get you going on your podcast, on your YouTube videos, on your TikToks, whatever that might be. I want to help you with your digital science communication. It doesn't even have to be on the ocean. I want to help you with your science communication. So hit me up at How to Protect the Ocean on Instagram. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. I would love to hear from you. And I'll probably send you a link to sign up officially so that we have people involved. And then see, once we get enough people, we'll start a program, right? And start a program where we can meet twice a month and be able to talk and go through your questions and be able to talk through that process. But anyway, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this little inspirational episode that I thought about while listening to the podcast that I was listening to. But this is something that I feel is really important in science communication, because we need more people to talk about their science, to talk about their conservation, and to be able to bring it to other people that will connect with you. And there will be people that connect with you. If there's people that connect with me, there will definitely be people that connect with you. But anyway, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. If you know anybody who may benefit from listening to this, someone who wants to start a podcast but is just not on that, just on the cusp of it, they're a little worried about what people will think, send them my way at How to Protect the Ocean on Instagram, or share this episode with them. But until next time, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.